Hi guys, this is Mrs. Gastler, and in this video we're going to be doing lesson 4 and talking about drawing force diagrams. In order to think about this one, we're going to have to remember that forces are vectors. That's the real gist here. That means they have magnitude, which if you'll recall is how hard they're pushing or pulling, and they also have direction, which is which way they're going. Okay. The definition of a force diagram is a picture that uses arrows to show all the forces acting on one object. Okay, I wrote that kind of small, but if you have more than one object, that means you're going to be drawing more than one force diagram. So to draw a force diagram, the first thing you're going to start with is a dot for the object. Doesn't matter how big the dot or the object is, it's a dot. Sometimes we kind of put objects together, like if you've got a guy on a bike and you're drawing a force diagram for the guy on the bike, you might do the guy and the bike, still a dot. Okay, everything's a dot in a force diagram. And then we add arrows that go away from the dot. They always point away from the dot. We're not pointing them at the dot. They always go away from the dot. And they point in the direction that the force is going. Okay, so if the force is pushing it down, then the arrow would point down away from the dot. And however hard the force is pushing or pulling, the length of the arrow represents that. So a bigger force would have a longer arrow. Okay. Now we're going to look at drawing some, and I hope this works out okay. I had a lot of fun setting this up here. Okay. So we've got first a car. I'm going to kind of zoom in so we can see it better. Traveling down the highway. And go in there. That one. There we go. And there's a picture of a car there. Again, we're gonna draw it as a dot. Here's our dot. And the first force that we often draw is the force of gravity. Gravity is always there, and so it's always pointing down. So there it is. And we're going to draw a label. We have to label our arrows so that we know what we're talking about. So this one is an F with a G on it. So we're going to label it right there next to the arrow so that we know which one it is. The next arrow that we're going to apply, or that we're going to draw, is the normal force. And then remember, the car isn't going down, so there's a force that is supporting it. So that's the normal force. It points up from the road there. And we got to label that one, the normal force, which is a F with a subscript N. Now something is making the car go down the highway, and that's the engine. It's not on our list of forces in our types of forces foldable. There's nothing on there that says engine, so this is just a generic applied force, and I could write that the force is the engine. I could put F engine, or I could write the force applied. It points forward though, and so there it is pointing forward, and I've labeled it as applied. You could write engine if you really want to. It doesn't really matter. That's less important, but it's not. That's not it for the forces though, because I don't know if you've ever driven a car, but there's a lot of friction going on there, so I also have to draw friction. Friction is opposing the motion. My car is going to the left. I'm sorry, to the right in the picture, so friction must be going to the right. And so there it is, and I've got to label that one too, so there is my frictional force. Isn't that cool how that worked out? It was really nice. Okay, now we got one more that we're going to draw here. In my picture there's a box sliding down a ramp. Not really obvious that it's going in that picture, but it is. And so I've got a note here that there are some special considerations. When you have stuff on a ramp, you have to be careful with those ramps because there are angles. Other situations where there are angles are when you've got someone pulling or pushing at an angle. If your forces are at angles, you got to draw those at angles too. Okay, so we're going to see what that looks like. So again, we've got to start with a dot. Actually, I didn't start with a dot here. I started with a line. That represents my ramp. That's going to help me make sure that I keep things oriented in a ramp. That'll help me make sure that I have taken into account that there's an angle in here when I draw the rest of mine. But I'm still going to start with a dot. There's my dot. Okay, on my ramp. Okay. Now my first one that I always draw is gravity. Even though my ramp is at an angle, gravity is still going to point straight down. So here's gravity, straight down. Notice it's not at an angle, it's straight down still, okay? And here's me labeling it as gravity, FG for gravity, okay? Now my normal force, because it's not falling down, I mean it is sliding down the ramp, but it's not falling down the ramp. It's not going through the ramp, so the ramp, it's at an angle, the ramp is still supporting it, so it's going to be at an angle, and it's perpendicular. Notice how I could draw, will it draw? There we go. it will draw a perpendicular angle right there. That's perpendicular. Okay, recognize that symbol from math class. That is a perpendicular angle. So my normal force is always perpendicular. Okay. And then as it goes down the ramp, as it's going down the ramp, friction is opposing that motion. So friction is going to be going up the ramp. So apparently I labeled it first and then I drew the arrow. So there's the arrow of friction going up the ramp. To be honest, friction is not pushing that hard. I should have drawn that arrow much shorter than I actually did. Okay. Maybe like half as long. That arrow looks much too long to me in my drawing, but it is pointing in the right direction and it is representing a force that is on this box. Okay, so that is a couple of examples that of how we can draw some force diagrams. Sometimes there's only one force, sometimes there's only two forces, sometimes there's 5 forces. As long as we're making sure that all of the forces are represented, then we've done a good job drawing our force diagrams. If you have any questions at all, this is one of the harder topics that we're learning in this unit. Make sure you ask your teacher for help. Thanks for watching.